December 7th, 2014, from the TCF Bank Stadium in Minneapolis, Minnesota, was the New York Jets at the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings won the toss and they elected to defer. So now the Jets would start this game off with the ball on their own 23, and on the first play, Geno Smith dropped back to pass, and he was intercepted by Gerald, Hodges, and he ran it back 27 yards for the pick six and the touchdown for the Vikings, as they put the first points on the scoreboard with the score Minnesota 7, New York 0. So now the Jets will get the ball for the second time in this game and the second play of this game from scrimmage, and we already had 2 kickoffs. The Jets had it on their own 20 now, and there was still just only 12 seconds off the clock at this point. But then they were faced with a 3rd and 7 from the 23, and Geno Smith hit Percy Harvin for a 45-yard pass to make it a first down in Minnesota territory. He brought the ball across midfield to the 32 for the first down. But then Geno Smith was sacked by Robinson. He didn't lose any yards, though. But they would end up with 3rd and 10 from the 32, and then Geno Smith was sacked again, this time by Harrison Smith, and this time for a 12-yard loss, and out would come the punting unit, as the Jets would punt from their own 40, or from the Minnesota 44. Now the Vikings took over on their own 11-yard line, backed up against their own end zone. 11 minutes on the clock in the first. They ended up getting a false start, and they ended up having to move back to the 6. Asiata picked up 2 yards, and on 2nd and 13 from the 8, Teddy Bridgewater out of the shotgun was sacked for an 8-yard loss by Richardson, and it was a safety. And now the Jets were on the scoreboard as they cut the lead to 5, as the Twins were now up on the Yankees 7-5. Oh wait, no, it's football. It's the Vikings 7, the Jets 2. Actually, what am I? Anyway. So now the Jets, it seemed like a baseball score, 7-2. It's like 7-2, Minnesota over New York. Twins and the Yankees. Anyway, so now on the 35 is where the Jets will get the ball after the kickoff, with about 10 minutes left in the first. Then they were faced with a 3rd and 5 from the 40, and a penalty against the defense for interference made a first down on the Minnesota 39 for the Jets. They were then faced with a 3rd and 6 from the 35, and Geno Smith hit Percy Harvin for the 35-yard touchdown pass that gave the Jets the lead by 2 with the score New York 9, Minnesota 7. So now the Vikings got the ball on their own 30 with about 7.5 minutes left in the first. They were then faced with a 3rd and 3 from the 37. Bridgewater out of the no-huddle hit Greg Jennings for a 7-yard reception and a first down that brought the ball to the 44 of Minnesota for the Vikings. And on first down, Teddy Bridgewater hit Charles Johnson for a 56-yard touchdown pass that made the score Minnesota 14, New York 9. So now the Jets would take over with a little less than 6 minutes left in the quarter. They had it on their own 35. They ended up with a 2nd and 8 and on the 33, and Geno Smith out of the no-huddle hit Decker for an 8-yard reception and a first down at the Minnesota 25. So then now it ended up stalling at the 18, and Nick Folk would come out to attempt a 36-yard field goal. It was up, and it was good, as the Jets now cut the Vikings lead to just 2 with the score Minnesota 14, New York 12. If you wonder why they start off on Minnesota territory in that possession, was because Percy Harvin had a 47-yard return on the kickoff that I skimmed over. But anyway, so now Minnesota got the ball after the field goal, and they had it on their own 42, as they had a decent little return by Asiata for 12 yards. And it was now faced with a 3rd and 3 from the 49. Bridgewater hit Greg Jennings for a 7-yard reception and a first down in New York territory as they brought the ball across midfield to the 44. Then on first down, Asiata picked up 8 yards, and then that would bring the first quarter to a close with the score Minnesota 14, New York 12, as we saw 26 total points already in the first quarter between these two teams that don't necessarily put up a lot of points. But now to begin the second quarter, the Minnesota Vikings had the ball on the New York 36. It was 2nd and 2. Asiata picked up 7 yards in the first down that brought the ball to the 29 of the Jets. Cordero Patterson then picked up 6 yards. So now it was 2nd and 4 for the Vikings on the New York 23. Teddy Bridgewater then hit Charles Johnson. He caught the ball and he brought it into the end zone for a 23-yard touchdown. But wait, he got hit. He fumbled it. The ball landed in the end zone, and Jerome Felton jumped on it, and it was a touchdown for the Vikings. And now the score was Minnesota 21, New York 12, as the Vikings extended their lead to 9. So now the Jets would take over with about 13.5 minutes left in the quarter. The ball on their own 20. They were faced with a 3rd and 8 from the 22. Geno Smith then hit Eric Decker for a 14-yard reception and a first down that brought the ball to the 36. Then a penalty of holding brought them back to the 26. They ended up with 1st and 15, and a 17-yard reception by Percy Harvin from Geno Smith brought the ball to the 48. But then on first down, Ivory fumbled, but it was recovered by New York. Giacomini recovered it, and it ended up being a holding penalty. So now the Jets actually went backwards, and it was 1st and 20 on the 38. They ended up picking up 17 yards on first down with a reception by Curley. 2nd and 3 from the 45 out of the no-huddle. Geno Smith had Owusu for a 7-yard reception and a first down at the 38. Johnson then ran for 8 yards and then another 3 yards and a first down to bring the ball to the 27. Now the other Chris, Ivory, ran for 15 yards and the first down that brought the ball to the red zone for a first down at the 12. Then on 2nd and 3, Chris Ivory fumbles the ball, and Captain Munnerlyn recovered. So now the Vikings would take over just as it looked like the Jets were going to score. But now with 7.5 minutes left in the second quarter, Minnesota was backed up against their end zone on the 4-yard line. They were faced with a 3rd and 5 from the 9. A couple plays later, and Bridgewater hit Charles Johnson, this time for an 8-yard reception and a first down that brought the ball to the 17. But they would end up having a punt from the 26 a few plays later. And now the Jets had the ball back on their 35 now to start this possession with less than 4 minutes left before halftime. They picked up a first down on 3rd and 2 from the 43 when Percy Harvin ran for 4 yards on an end around. Then on 3rd and 5 from the Minnesota 48, a defensive pass interference call against the Vikings would make it a first down on the 34 for the Jets. Then on 3rd and 1 from the 25, Ivory picked up 6 yards and a first down that brought the ball into the red zone at the 19. But their drive would stall when on 3rd and 6, Geno Smith was sacked by Everson Griffin, the heart of the Minnesota Vikings defense. And now the Jets would have to settle for a field goal as Nick Folk came out to attempt a 33-yard field goal. It was up, it was good, and it was now a 6-point game with the score Minnesota 21, New York 15. So now the Vikings would get the ball with just a few seconds left before halftime. They decided to air it out. Bridgewater hit Banyard for a 12-yard reception, and then they took their second timeout with just seconds on the clock, and they decided, hey, let's take a shot for the end zone at the New York 47 in Jets territory. Too far for a field goal, but out of the shotgun, Bridgewater just tossed it up in the air and ended up being intercepted by Walsh as the first half came to a close. So after the first half of play, the score was Minnesota 21, New York 15. So now to begin the third quarter, the Jets would have the ball on the Minnesota 26. And what happened was Cordero Patterson actually fumbled the opening kickoff, and the Jets recovered. So that's why they had it on the Minnesota 26. Chris Ivory ran for 9 yards on first down, and then on second and 1 from the 17, Ivory ran for 14 yards in the first down that made it 1st and goal on the 3. He then lost 2 yards. Then Geno Smith ended up picking up a yard, but an incomplete pass would bring out Nick Folk to attempt a 22-yard field goal. Chip shot was in, up and good. It was now a 3-point game with the score Minnesota 21, New York 18. So now the Vikings would take over with about 12 minutes in between on the clock in the third with the ball on the 14. Then on 3rd and 4 from the 20, Bridgewater picked up 3 yards, and an unnecessary roughness penalty against the defense made it a first down at the 38. Then on 3rd and 13 from the 35, Bridgewater was sacked by Allen for a 9-yard loss, but a penalty against the defense for holding made a first down on the Minnesota 40 for the Vikings. On 3rd and 1 from the 49, Asiata picked up 5 yards in the first down that brought the ball across midfield to the New York 46. And on 2nd and 4 from the 40, Bridgewater hit Jennings for a 17-yard reception that made a first down on the Jets 23. Asiata then picked up it. He ended up picking up a yard, and then it ended up with Walsh. The drive stalled on the 21, and Blair Walsh came out to attempt the 39-yard field goal, and it was no good. And so the score remained 21-18, Minnesota over New York. So now that after the missed field goal, the Jets would take over on their own 29 with 5 minutes left in the third. They then had 3rd and 2 on the 37. Geno Smith hit Percy Harvin for a 9-yard reception in the first down that brought the ball to the 46. And on 2nd and 9 from the 47, Geno Smith hit Eric Decker for the 29-yard reception. And it was now the Jets' ball in Minnesota territory on the 24. Then on 2nd and 7 from the 21, Geno Smith hit Johnson for an 8-yard reception and a first down that brought the ball into the red zone for the first down on the 13. Geno Smith then ran it for no gain, and the third quarter came to a close with the Jets trailing by 3, the Vikings up by 3, with the score Minnesota 21, New York 18. To begin the fourth quarter, the Jets had the ball on the Minnesota 13. It was 2nd and 10. Geno Smith hit Decker for a 7-yard reception, and an incomplete pass would bring out Nick Folk to attempt to tie this game with a 24-yard field goal, and he nailed the chip shot. And this game was now tied at 21 apiece. So now the Vikings would take over on their own 23 after the kickoff. And on 2nd and 4 from the 29, Ben Tate had an 8-yard run. They made a first down on the 37. Then on 2nd and 2 from the 45, Ben Tate ran for 3 yards. Ben Tate then picked up 4 yards. And on 3rd and 1, Teddy Bridgewater hit Rudolph for a 3-yard reception. And so now it was first down in Jets territory at the 40. And then they ended up having to punt the ball, though, 4 plays later from the Jets' 43 after Bridgewater was sacked on 3rd and 10 by Richardson for a 3-yard loss. So now New York would take over on their own 5-yard line, backed up against their own end zone with about 9.5 minutes left in the quarter. They would go 3 and out and punt the ball back to the Vikings, who now took over with less than 9 minutes left on the clock in the quarter. They had it on the Jets' 47. And on 2nd down, Bridgewater hit Johnson for a 17-yard reception that brought the ball to the New York 30 for the Vikings. Wright then ran it 23 yards on the end around. It was now 1st and goal on the 7 for Minnesota. But they weren't able to punch it into the end zone, and out would come Blair Walsh to attempt a 20-yard field goal. And it was up, it was good, and it was now Minnesota 24, New York 21. So now the Jets would get the ball with a little less than 5.5 minutes left in the quarter. They had it on their own 21, and they went 3 and out for the second straight possession as they would punt from their own 30. And now the Vikings would take over on their own 12, and they would go 3 and out. Bridgewater was sacked on 2nd down by Richardson, as Richardson was terrorizing him all day long. It was actually even a holding penalty, but they declined it. So after punting the ball from the 12, now they gave the ball to the Jets, who took over on their own 29 with 3 minutes left in the quarter. And now they were faced with a 3rd and 1 from the 38, and they would end up having a 3-yard run by Johnson, and that was the first down on the 41 of New York for New York. And now on 2nd and 1 from the 50, Geno Smith picked up 18 yards in the first down that brought the ball into Minnesota territory at the 32. Powell ran for 6 yards, but then a pair of incomplete passes would bring out Nick Folk to attempt a 44-yard field goal. It was up, it was good, and this game was tied at 24. So now Minnesota would get the ball with just seconds left in this game in regulation. They had it on their own 22, and they ended up picking up a 27-yard reception when Bridgewater hit Wright. And they ended up with the ball now at midfield at the 49 with only 7 seconds left. Bridgewater hit Jennings. He picked up 13 yards, and the Jets ended up taking a timeout. So it's now a first down on the New York 38 for Minnesota, and out came Blair Walsh to attempt the 56-yard game-winning field goal. It was up and it was short. So we were going to overtime because that was the final play of regulation. So now in overtime, the Jets would get the ball first, and they had the ball on their own 20 to start things off. They were faced with a 3rd and 3 from the 27. Geno Smith to Eric Decker, a 26-yard reception of first down at midfield at the Minnesota 47. So they got in Minnesota territory. But then Irie, no gain. Smith picked up 4 yards on 2nd and 10 from the 47, but on 3rd and 6, an incomplete pass would bring out the punting unit. And so now they punted from the 43, and the Vikings would take over, backed up against their own end zone on their own 8-yard line. Asiata ran for 2 yards on 1st down to bring it to the 10, 2nd and 8. Bridgewater then passed it to Asiata. He picked up 3 yards. So now it's 3rd and 5 from the Minnesota 13. Teddy Bridgewater trots back, and it's Jarius Wright. And Jarius Wright takes it 87 yards to the end zone. Touchdown, Vikings. And the Vikings win with the longest touchdown ever in overtime history. At the final score, Minnesota 30, New York 24. So the Vikings with the win, the huge 87-yard touchdown, making history with that win. That makes them now 6-7 on the season. They're now 4-3 at home. They're going to be at least 500 in Minnesota, playing at the University of Minnesota Stadium there, TCF Bank Stadium in Minneapolis. The Jets are now 2-11 with the loss. They're still winless on the road. They're 0-6 in 2014 away from MetLife. And so in this game, Teddy Bridgewater, 19 for 27 with 309 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, just 1 interception. He had 7 yards off 3 carries. Geno Smith was 18 for 29 with 254 yards passing, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. He had 33 yards on the ground and 6 carries. Geno had a good day. He came out there and competed against a tough Minnesota defense. But Bridgewater just had a great day, an amazing day, coming up huge for the Vikings. The leading rusher in this game was Chris Ivory. He had 73 yards and 16 carries. That's how he got there. He also had 4 yards off of 1 reception. Chris Johnson had 16 carries for 53 yards, and he had 13 yards off of 2 receptions. The leading rusher for Minnesota was Matt Asiata. He had 19 carries for 54 yards. And Jarius Wright, he had that 1 carry for 23 yards. He also was the leading receiver for the Vikings, almost leading receiver in the game. He had 123 yards off of 4 receptions, including a touchdown. The leading receiver in the game was actually Percy Harvin with 1 more yard than Wright. He had 6 receptions for 124 yards and a touchdown. But hey, Wright got the W. The game winner too. The most important play of the game, that 87-yard touchdown for the win. That's what Jarius Wright did. Percy Harvin also had 2 carries for 3 yards. Before Minnesota, though, Charles Johnson had 4 receptions for 103 yards and a touchdown as well, and Greg Jennings had 5 receptions for 52 yards. For the Jets, Eric Decker had 6 receptions for 89 yards. And the leading tackler was a 2-way tie between Chad Greenway and also Robert Blanton of the Minnesota Vikings. They each had 11 tackles in this game. The Vikings had 3 sacks. Harrison Smith had a sack. Everson Griffin had a sack. And Brian Robeson also had a sack. And for the Jets, they also had 3 sacks as well. But all 3 of those sacks were for Sheldon Richardson as he got up in there. She was Senderic, I'm sorry. No, Sheldon. All right. Yes, I knew it was Sheldon. That's what I said. David Harris had 9 tackles to be the Jets' leading tackler. So there's your stats. And each Walsh had an interception for the Jets. Hodges had an interception for the Vikings. Close game all the way down to the wire, going to overtime. In the longest play in overtime history, Teddy Bridgewater. Or actually, I think the 3rd longest. All right. So the 3rd longest play in overtime history. And the final score, Minnesota 30, Jets 24.